5. Buddhism and Jainism. A.D. 6th CE was a period of great religious upheaval. Great teachers like Confucius in China, Zoroaster in Iran, and Parmenides in Greece questioned the established sociological norms and focused more on ethical and moral values. In India, the scenario was no different. India witnessed the growth of two great alternative religions, Buddhism and Jainism. These religions emphasized that true happiness does not lie in material prosperity or performance of rituals, but in non-violence, charity, frugality, and good social conduct. Various reasons are attributed to the origin and popularity of these two important and potent religious reform movements. Causes of origin: the Kshatriyas' reaction against domination of the Brahmanas. The post-Vedic society was clearly divided into four Varnas: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Kshatriyas, who function as rulers and warriors, were ranked second in the Varna hierarchy. They reacted strongly against the ritualistic domination of the Brahmanas and the various privileges enjoyed by the priestly class, such as receiving gifts and exemption from taxation and punishment. It is rather unsurprising that both Buddha and Mahavira, key leaders of Buddhism and Jainism, who strongly disputed the authority of the Brahmanas, belonged to the Kshatriya Varna. Equally interesting is the fact that Buddhist Pali texts frequently reject the Brahmanical claim to innate superiority and reverses the Brahmanical order of rank, thus placing Kshatriyas higher than the Brahmanas. Rise of new agricultural economy which demanded animal husbandry. In the 6th century BCE, as we have noted earlier, see the center of economic and political activity shifted from Haryana and western UP to eastern UP and Bihar, which had more rainfall and more fertile land. Since it was now easier to exploit the iron ore resources of Bihar and adjoining regions, people started using more and more iron tools and plowshare to clear the thick forest cover and cultivate the hitherto unexplored areas. The agricultural economy based on iron plowshare required the use of resulted in killing of cattle indiscriminately and stood in the way of the progress of the new agricultural economy. Thus, for the stability and prosperity of the new agrarian economy, this slaughtering of animals had to be stopped. Since both Buddhism and Jainism advocated non-violence and were strongly against any form of sacrifices, they were found promising to the peasant masses. Patronizing of Buddhism and Jainism by Vaishyas and other mercantile groups who wanted better social status and a reign of peace, as we are well aware, the 6th century BCE is known as the era of second urbanization in the Indian subcontinent. Expansion of agriculture resulted in improved food supply and helped in the development of craft production, trade, and urban centers. The development of trade is reflected in silver and copper punchmarked coins, PMC, by the numismatists. More than 60 towns and cities such as Patliputra, Rajagriha, Shravasti, Varanasi, Vaishali, Champa, Kaushambi, and Ujjaini developed between 600 and 300 BCE. These cities became centers of craft production and trade, and were inhabited by a large number of artisans and merchants. This general economic progress had led to the rise of the Vaishyas and other mercantile groups, who wanted better social position than what the Brahmanas gave them. Since Buddhism and Jainism did not attach any importance to the existing Varna system, preferred to patronize non-Vedic religions like Buddhism and Jainism through substantial donations. Also, both Buddhism and Jainism preached the gospel of non-violence, which could put an end to wars between different kingdoms, and consequently promote further trade and commerce, which was beneficial for this economic class. Ready acceptance of simple, ascetic, peace-centered principles of Buddhism and Jainism by general folk, lately the improvement in agriculture and development of trade, money, and urbanization had an impact on the society as well. Due to these changes, traditional equality and brotherhood gave way to inequality and social conflict. People wanted some kind of reprieve from the increasing social problems like violence, cruelty, theft, hatred, and falsehood. Common people yearned to return to simple, primitive, and uncorrupt life. Therefore, when new religions such as Buddhism and Jainism preached the concept of peace and social equality, simple and Puritan ascetic living, people welcomed it. Gautama Buddha and Buddhism. Early Buddhist literature. Our understanding of Gautama Buddha and various 6th century BCE was a period of great religious upheaval. Great teachers like Confucius in China, Zoroaster in Iran, and Parmenides in Greece questioned the established sociological norms and focused more on ethical and moral values. In and Jainism, these religions emphasized that true happiness does not lie in material prosperity or performance of rituals, but in non-violence, charity, frugality, and good social conduct. Various reasons are attributed to the origin and popularity of these two important and potent warriors, were ranked second in the Varna hierarchy. They reacted strongly against the ritualistic domination of the Brahmanas and the various privileges enjoyed by the priestly class, such as receiving gifts and exemption from taxation and punishment. It is rather unsurprising that both Buddha and Mahavira, key leaders of Buddhism and Jainism, who strongly disputed the authority of the Brahmanas, belonged to the Kshatriya Varna. Equally interesting is the fact that Buddhist Pali texts frequently reject the Brahmanical claim to innate superiority and reverses the Brahmanical order of rank, thus placing Kshatriyas higher than the Brahmanas. Rise of new agricultural economy which demanded animal husbandry. In the 6th century BCE, as we have noted earlier, see the center of economic and political activity shifted from Haryana and western UP to eastern UP and Bihar, which had more rainfall and more fertile land. Since it was now easy to exploit the iron ore resources of Bihar and adjoining regions, people started using more and more iron tools and plowshare to clear the thick forest cover and cultivate the hitherto unexplored areas. The agricultural economy based on iron plowshare required the use of bullocks, and thus could only flourish with animal husbandry. But the Vedic practice of animal sacrifice resulted in killing of cattle indiscriminately and stood in the way of the progress of the new agricultural economy. Thus, for the stability and prosperity of the new agrarian economy, this slaughtering of animals had to be stopped. Since both Buddhism and Jainism advocated non-violence and were strongly against any form of sacrifices, they were found promising to the peasant masses. Patronizing of Buddhism and Jainism by Vaishyas and other mercantile groups who wanted better social status and a reign of peace, as we are well aware, the 6th century BCE is known as the era of second urbanization in the Indian subcontinent. Expansion of agriculture resulted in improved food supply and helped in the development of craft production, trade, and urban centers. The development of trade is reflected in discovery of thousands of silver and copper punch-marked coins, PMC, by the numismatists. More than 60 towns and cities such as Patliputra, Rajagriha, Shravasti, Varanasi, Vaishali, Champa, Kaushambi, and Ujjaini developed between 600 and 300 BCE. These cities became centers of craft production and trade, and were inhabited by a large number of artisans and merchants. This general economic progress had led to the rise of the Vaishyas and other mercantile groups, who wanted better social position than what the Brahmanas gave them. Since Buddhism and Jainism did not attach any importance to the existing world system, preferred to patronize non-Vedic religions like Buddhism and Jainism through substantial donations. Also, both Buddhism and Jainism preached the gospel of non-violence, which could put an end to wars between different kingdoms, and consequently promote further trade and commerce, which was beneficial for this economic class. Ready acceptance of simple, ascetic, peace-centered principles of Buddhism and Jainism by general folk, led the improvement in agriculture and development of trade, money, and urbanization had an impact on the society as well. Due to these changes, traditional equality and brotherhood gave way to inequality and social conflict. People wanted some kind of reprieve from the increasing social problems like violence, cruelty, theft, hatred, and falsehood. Common people yearned to return to simple, primitive, and uncorrupt life. Therefore, when new religions such as Buddhism and Jainism preached the concept of peace and social equality, simple and Puritan ascetic living, people welcomed it. Gautama Buddha and Buddhism. Early Buddhist literature. Our understanding of Gautama Buddha and various other facets of Buddhism is derived mostly from early Buddhist literature. Early Buddhist literature is generally divided into canonical and non-canonical texts. Canonical texts are those texts that are directly linked to Gautama Buddha in one way or another. However, differences exist among various Buddhist schools as to which texts are canonical. They can simply be understood as books which lay down the basic tenets and principles of Buddhism, such as the Tipithakas, three Pithakas, also known as the Pali Canon. Non-canonical texts or semi-canonical texts are texts that are not the sayings of the Buddha, but commentaries and observations on canonical texts, treatise on the Dhammapada. AB historical information, quotes, definitions, grammars, and other writings in Pali, Tibetan, Chinese, and other East Asian languages. Some important non-canonical texts are Milinda Banho, written in Pali. It consists of a dialogue on various philosophical issues between the Indo-Greek king Milinda Menander and the monk Nagasena, Netipakrana, the Book of Guidance, which gives a connected account of the Buddha's teachings, Visuddhimagga, the path to purity, written by Buddhaghosa, deals with development from purity of discipline to Nibbana enlightenment, Nirnata, first connected life story of Buddha, the Deepavansa and the Mahavansa, written in Pali. Both contain historical mythical account of the Buddha's life, Buddhist councils, Ashoka, and arrival of Buddhism to Sri Lanka, and Mahavastu, written in mixed Sanskrit Prakrit. It lays down the sacred biography, i.e., hagiography of the Buddha. The Tipitaka, in Pali, and Tripitaka, in Sanskrit, meaning, the Three Baskets collections is one of the earliest compilations of Buddhist teachings written, originally, on long, narrow leaves. The Buddhist monks transcribed and categorized the Buddha's teachings in three baskets, which is how the name, Three Baskets originated. All branches of Buddhism have the Tripitaka as part of their core scriptures, which comprises three books, the Sutta, conventional teaching, the Vinaya, disciplinary code, and the Abhidhamma, moral psychology. The Sutta Pitaka, Sutra basket of discourses. This contains the Buddha's discourses on various doctrinal issues in dialogue form. These texts are also known as Buddha Vakena, or the word of the Buddha, as it refers to texts that are supposed to contain what the Buddha himself said. With the exception of few sutras, the authority of this text is accepted by all Buddhist schools. These discourses were arranged on the basis of the manner in which they were delivered. The Vinaya Pitaka, discipline basket. This contains rules for monks and nuns of the monastic order, Sangh. It includes the Patimukka, a list of transgressions against monastic discipline and atonements for these. Apart from monastic rules, the Vinaya texts also include doctrinal expositions, ritual texts. See biographical stories, and some elements of the Jatakas, or birth stories. The Abhidhamma Pitaka, basket of higher teachings. This contains a thorough study and systemization of the teachings of the Sutta Pitaka through summaries, questions and answers, lists, etc. The three Pitakas are divided into Nikayas, books. For instance, the Sutta Pitaka consists of 5 Nikayas, Digha Nikaya, collection of long discourses, Majjhima Nikaya, collection of medium-length discourses, Sanyutta Nikaya, collection of kindred sayings, Anguttara Nikaya, collection of discourses arranged in accordance with number, and Khuddaka Nikaya, smaller collection. The Khuddaka Nikaya is further subdivided into 15 books, the prominent among them being the Jatakas, stories of the previous births of the Buddha, Dhammapada, verses dealing with ethical sayings, Nitesa, expositions, Buddhavansa, the history of Buddha, Patisambhida, analytical knowledge, the Thiratha and Tharitha, songs of Buddhist monks and nuns. Life of the Buddha. The hagiography. Early Buddhist literature. Our understanding of Gautama Buddha and various other facets of Buddhism is derived mostly from early Buddhist literature. Early Buddhist literature is generally divided into canonical and non-canonical texts. Canonical texts are those texts that are directly linked to Gautama Buddha in one way or another. However, differences exist among various Buddhist schools as to which texts are canonical. They can simply be understood as books which lay down the basic tenets and principles of Buddhism, such as the Tipitakas, three Pitakas, also known as the Pali Canon. Non-canonical texts or semi-canonical texts are texts that are not the sayings of the Buddha, but commentaries and observations on canonical texts, treatise on the Dhammapada. AB historical information, quotes, definitions, grammars, and other writings in Pali, Tibetan, Chinese, and other East Asian languages. Some important non-canonical texts are Milinda Banho, written in Pali. It consists of a dialogue on various philosophical issues between the Indo-Greek king Milinda Menander and the monk Nagasena, Netipakrana, the Book of Guidance, which gives a connected account of the Buddha's teachings. Visuddhimagga, the path to purity, written by Buddhaghosa, deals with development from purity of discipline to Nibbana enlightenment. Nidnatha, first connected life story of Buddha, the Deepavansa and the Mahavansa, written in Pali. Both contain historical cum mythical account of the Buddha's life, Buddhist councils, Ashoka, and arrival of Buddhism to Sri Lanka, and Mahavastu, written in mixed Sanskrit Prakrit. It lays down the sacred biography, i.e., hagiography of the Buddha. The Tipitaka, in Pali, historical information, quotes, definitions, grammars, and other writings in Pali, Tibetan, Chinese, and other East Asian languages. Some important non-canonical texts are Milinda Panho, written in Pali. It consists of a dialogue on various philosophical issues between the Indo-Greek king Milinda Menander and the monk Nagasena, Netipakrana, the Book of Guidance, which gives a connected account of the Buddha's teachings. Visuddhimagga, the path to purity, written by Buddhaghosa, deals with development from purity of discipline to Nibbana enlightenment. Nidnatha, first connected life story of Buddha, the Deepavansa and the Mahavansa, written in Pali. Both contain historical cum mythical account of the Buddha's life, Buddhist councils, Ashoka, and arrival of Buddhism to Sri Lanka, and Mahavastu, written in mixed Sanskrit Prakrit. It lays down the sacred biography, i.e., hagiography of the Buddha. The Tipitaka, in Pali, and Tripitaka, in Sanskrit, meaning, the Three Baskets collections is one of the earliest compilations of Buddhist teachings written, originally, on long, narrow leaves. The Buddhist monks transcribed and categorized the Buddha's teachings in three baskets, which is how the name, Three Baskets originated. All branches of Buddhism have the Tripitaka as part of their core scriptures, which comprises three books, the Sutta, conventional teaching, the Vinaya, disciplinary code, and the Abhidhamma, moral psychology. The Sutta Pitaka, Sutra basket of discourses. This contains the Buddha's discourses on various doctrinal issues in dialogue form. These texts are also known as Buddha Vakena, or the word of the Buddha, as it refers to texts that are supposed to contain what the Buddha himself said. With the exception of few sutras, the authority of this text is accepted by all Buddhist schools. These discourses were arranged on the basis of the manner in which they were delivered. The Vinaya Pitaka, discipline basket. This contains rules for monks and nuns of the monastic order. Sang. It includes the Patimukka, a list of transgressions against monastic discipline and atonements for these. Apart from monastic rules, the AB historical information, quotes, definitions, grammars, and other writings in Pali, Tibetan, Chinese, and other East Asian languages. Some important non-canonical texts are Milinda Panho, written in Pali. It consists of a dialogue on various philosophical issues between the Indo-Greek king Milinda Menander and the monk Nagasena, Netipakrana, the Book of Guidance, which gives a connected account of the Buddha's teachings. Visuddhimagga, the path to purity, written by Buddhaghosa, deals with development from purity of discipline to Nibbana enlightenment. Nidnatha, first connected life story of Buddha, the Deepavansa and the Mahavansa, written in Pali. Both contain historical cum mythical account of the Buddha's life, Buddhist councils, Ashoka, and arrival of Buddhism to Sri Lanka, and Mahavastu, written in mixed Sanskrit Prakrit. It lays down the sacred biography, i.e., hagiography of the Buddha. The Tipitaka, in Pali, and Tripitaka, in Sanskrit, meaning, the Three Baskets collections is one of the earliest compilations of Buddhist teachings written, originally, on long, narrow leaves. The Buddhist monks transcribed and categorized the Buddha's teachings in three baskets, which is how the name, Three Baskets originated. All branches of Buddhism have the Tripitaka as part of their core scriptures, which comprises three books, the Sutta, conventional teaching, the Vinaya, disciplinary code, and the Abhidhamma, moral psychology. The Sutta Pitaka, Sutra basket of discourses. This contains the Buddha's discourses on various doctrinal issues in dialogue form. These texts are also known as Buddha Vakena, or the word of the Buddha, as it refers to texts that are supposed to contain what the Buddha himself said. With the exception of few sutras, the authority of this text is accepted by all Buddhist schools. These discourses were arranged on the basis of the manner in which they were delivered. The Vinaya Pitaka, discipline basket. This contains rules for monks and nuns of the monastic order. Sang. It includes the Patimukka, a list of transgressions against monastic discipline and atonements for these. Apart from monastic rules, the Vinaya texts also include doctrinal expositions, ritual texts, see biographical stories, and some elements of the Jatakas, or birth stories. The Abhidhamma Pitaka, basket of higher teachings. This contains a thorough study and systemization of the teachings of the Sutta Pitaka through summaries, questions and answers, lists, etc. The three Pitakas are divided into Nikayas, books. For instance, the Sutta Pitaka consists of 5 Nikayas: Digha Nikaya, collection of long discourses; Majjhima Nikaya, collection of medium-length discourses; Sanyutta Nikaya, collection of kindred sayings; Anguttara Nikaya, collection of discourses arranged in accordance with number; and Khuddaka Nikaya, smaller collection. The Khuddaka Nikaya is further subdivided into 15 books, the prominent among them being the Jatakas, stories of the previous births of the Buddha; Dhammapta, verses dealing with ethical sayings; Nidesa, expositions; Buddhavansa, the history of Buddha; Patisamveda, analytical knowledge; the Thiratha and Tharitha, songs of Buddhist monks and nuns. Life of the Buddha. The hagiography, sacred biography, of Buddha is brief in the Sutta and Vinaya Pitakas, which is further explained in a more detailed and connected way in later texts of Buddha Charita, Mahavastu, and Nidnatha. According to tradition, Gautama Buddha, also known as Sakyamuni Tathagat, was born as Siddhartha in 563 BCE on Vashaka Purnima Day at Lumbini, near Kapilvastu, Nepal, to Suddhodana, chief of Republican Sakya clan, who ruled from Kapilvastu in the Kosala kingdom. His mother Mahamaya, princess of the Kosala dynasty, gave birth and died 7 days after his birth. Siddhartha was thus raised by his stepmother Gautami. It is believed that soon after he was born, certain Brahmanas saw the 32 marks of a Mahapurusha, great man, on his body and predicted that either he would be a world conqueror or a world renouncer. His father wanted to keep him away from the path of renunciation, hence he shielded him from all sorrows, and brought him up in luxury and comfort. The Buddha at the early age of 16 years, he was married to Yashodhara and had a son named Rahula. However, at the age of 29, after seeing an old man, a sick man, a corpse, and an ascetic, he decided to become a wanderer and left his palace with Channa, the charioteer, and his favorite horse. Kantaka, in search of truth, Mahabhinishkramna, great renunciation, and wandered for 6 years. He meditated with established teachers of that era, firstly with Alrakalma and then with Uddaka Ramaputta, but was not convinced with their instructions that man could obtain liberation from sorrow by mental discipline and knowledge only. Later on, accompanied by 5 wandering ascetics called Dhanna, Vadya, Vapa, Mahanama, and Asaji, he practiced severe austerities until his body was almost emaciated. Realizing that austerities could not lead to realization, he abandoned them. His 5 ascetic companions, disgusted at his seeming failure, deserted him and left for Sarnath. He then moved towards the village of Senani, where he was offered a bowl of milk rice by a low-caste village girl, Sujata. Accepting from a grass cutter a gift of kusa grass for a mat, he took a seat under a peepal tree facing east. Here he resolved not to rise again until enlightenment was attained. Here on this seat my body may shrivel up, my skin, my bones, my flesh may dissolve, but my body will not move from this seat until I have attained enlightenment, so difficult to obtain in the course of many kalpas. As Gautama sat in deep meditation, Mara, the lord of illusions, perceiving that his power was about to be broken, rushed to distract him from his purpose. Gautama touched the earth, calling it to bear witness the countless lifetimes of virtue that had led him to this place of enlightenment. When the earth shook, confirming the truth of Gautama's words, Mara unleashed his army of demons. In the epic battle that ensued, Gautama's wisdom broke through the illusions and the power of his compassion transformed the demons' weapons into flowers. Mara and all his forces fled in disarray. Thus, at the age of 35, he ultimately attained nirvana enlightenment at Gaya, Magad, Bihar, under a peepal tree at Uruvela, on the banks of river Niranjana, and came to be known as the Buddha, the Enlightened One. The peepal tree was known as the famous Bodhi tree. It is believed that Asoka's queen Tisaraka was jealous of the tree, and 3 years after she became queen, i.e., in the 19th year of Ashoka's reign, she caused the tree to be killed by means of mandu thorns. The tree, however, grew again. The tree was again cut down by King Pushyamitra Shunga in the 2nd century BCE, and by King Shashanka in 600 CE. Every time the tree was destroyed, a new tree was planted at the same place, and this tree at Bodh Gaya is still revered by Buddhists. The Buddha delivered his first sermon on deliverance from suffering to his 5 former companions in a deer park at Sarnath. This event is known as Dhammacakkappavattana, meaning turning the wheel of dharma. His 5 disciples soon realized the truth themselves and became arhats. The Buddha wandered about, teaching his doctrine for over 4 decades, and established an order of monks and nuns known as the Sangha. He finally attained parinibbana at the age of 80 at Kushinara, line in Mallas. It is believed that his last words were, "All composite things decay, strive diligently." Buddha is represented in 5 forms: lotus and bull birth, horse, renunciation, bodhi tree, Mahabodhi, Dhammachakra, Pravartana, first sermon, footprints, Nirvana, doctrines of Buddhism. The core of Buddha's doctrine is expressed in the Arya Sachchani, 4 noble truths, Ashtanjika Marga, eightfold path, middle path, social code of conduct, and attainment of Nibbana Nirvana. Buddha explains that his teachings are just like a raft, which helps one to cross over the turbulent river of life and suffering. Once across, we do not need to cart the raft around with us. In other words, Buddha urges that one should not cling to anything, including his teachings. The teachings are only upaya, skillful means or expedient tools, and are thus not dogma. It is fingers pointing at the moon, and one should not confuse the finger for the moon. His teachings contain 3 important pillars: Buddha, founder, teacher, Dhamma teachings. Times ABCD Sant order of Buddhist monks, nuns, who act as torch-bearers of Dhamma worshippers or upaskas and are a major factor in the dissemination of the Buddha's doctrine. While struggling for enlightenment, Buddha had discovered Dhamma, 4 noble truths which form the central teachings of Buddhism. The 4 noble truths are Buddha's 4 noble truths: the truth of suffering. Dukkha. Buddha taught that everything is suffering, sabam dukkham. It refers not only to the actual pain and sorrow experienced by an individual, but also to the potential to experience these things. The truth of the cause of suffering, samudaya. Suffering is part of living and there is a reason behind it. Desire, trishna, is main cause of suffering. The truth of the end of suffering, nirodha. This suffering can be ended by attaining nirvana nibbana. The truth of the path leading to the end of suffering, Astanjika Marga. There is a path that leads to the end of suffering. Buddha urged people to study, meditate, think, and act in ways that can help them come to a full understanding of each of these 4 noble truths and to stay on the path that will lead them to peace and happiness. Paradoxically, the Eightfold Path is more about unlearning rather than learning, i.e., to learn in order to unlearn and uncover. This path consists of 8 interconnected activities and is a process that 1, 2, 3, 4. AB helps one to move beyond the conditioned responses that obscure his/her true nature. The Astanjika Marga comprises the following: right vision or understanding, Samadhi. It signifies perfect view or understanding of the nature of reality and the path of transformation. Right thought or attitude, Samasankappa. It signifies having an emotional intelligence and acting from love and compassion. Right or whole speech, Sammavaka. It signifies clear, truthful, uplifting, and non-harmful communication. Right or integral action, Samakamanta. It signifies an ethical foundation of life, based on the principle of non-exploitation of oneself and others. It includes the 5 precepts, training rules, which are like an ethical code of conduct governing the behavior of members of the monastic order and the laity. Following are the 5 precepts: do not commit violence, to undertake the training to avoid taking the life of beings. This precept applies to all living beings and not just humans, as all beings have a right to their lives and that right should be respected. Do not covet the property of others. To undertake the training to avoid taking things not given this precept. CDEI 2. 3.5. 6 goes further than mere stealing, as it preaches that one should avoid taking anything unless one is totally sure that it is intended for him only. Do not indulge in corrupt practices or sensual behavior. To undertake the training to avoid sensual misconduct, this precept covers overindulgence in any sensual pleasure, such as gluttony, or misconduct of a sexual nature. For laity, celibacy was replaced by chastity. Do not speak a lie. To undertake the training to refrain from false speech, this precept covers slander, lying, deceiving, and speech that is not beneficial to the welfare of others. Do not use intoxicants. To undertake the training to abstain from substances which cause intoxication and heedlessness, this precept is in a special category as it does not infer any intrinsic evil in, say, alcohol itself, but believes that indulgence in such a substance could be the cause of breaking the other 4 precepts. In addition to these, monks and nuns were supposed to strictly observe 3 additional precepts, which are to avoid eating after midday, to abstain from dancing, singing, music, and other entertainment, as well as to refrain from using perfumes, ornaments, and other items used to adorn or beautify a person, to abstain from using high or luxurious beds, and from handling gold and silver, including money, right livelihood or proper livelihood. Samajiva, it signifies a livelihood based on correct action and on the ethical principle of non-exploitation. According to Buddha, it formed the basis of an ideal society. Right effort or energy vitality, Samavayam, it signifies consciously directing our life energy to the transformative path of creative and healing action that fosters wholeness, thus moving towards conscious evolution. 7.8. Right mindfulness or complete thorough awareness, Samasati, it signifies developing awareness about oneself and keenly watching self-behavior. Buddha says that, if you hold yourself dear, watch yourself well. Right concentration or meditation, Samasamadhi, it signifies samadhi, in the sense of enlightenment or Buddhahood. Samadhi literally means to be fixed, absorbed in or established at one point. Thus the first level of meaning is concentration, when the mind is fixed on a single object. The second level of meaning goes further and represents the establishment, not just of the mind, but also of the whole being in various levels or modes of consciousness and awareness. The path taught by the Buddha is often referred to as the middle path, the one between extreme indulgence and extreme asceticism. It should be noted that right here signifies proper, whole, thorough, integral, complete, and perfect. It does not necessarily mean right as opposed to wrong. For instance, the opposite of right awareness is not necessarily wrong awareness. It may simply be incomplete. Buddha had emphasized that if a person follows this eightfold path, then he will reach his destination of attaining Nibbana Nirvana without the machinations of the priests. Nibbana Nirvana is the ultimate goal of Buddha's teachings. The Pali word Nibbana is formed of ni and one. Ni is a negative particle and one means lusting or craving. It is called Nibbana, as it is a departure from the craving or lusting. Literally, Nibbana means non-attachment. It does not mean physical death, rather, it signifies dying out or extinction of desire, attachment, greed, ignorance, hatred, and even the sense of ego. Nibbana for the Buddhists is neither a mere nothingness, nor a state of annihilation, but what it is, no words can adequately express. Nibbana is a dhamma which is unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, and unformed. Hence, it is eternal, duva, desirable, subha, and happy, sukha. In Nibbana, nothing is eternalized, nor is anything annihilated besides suffering. Nibbana is not situated in any place, nor is it a sort of heaven where a transcendental ego resides. It is a supramundane state and an attainment. Dhamma, which is within the reach of all, even in this present life. Buddhism does not state that this ultimate goal can be reached only in a life beyond. Here lies the chief difference between the Buddhist conception of Nibbana and the non-Buddhist conception of an eternal heaven, attainable only after death or a union with a god or divine essence in an afterlife. When Nibbana is realized in this life with the body remaining, it is called Sopodisa Nibbana Dhatu. When an Arhat attains Parinibbana, complete or final dying out, only used for death of enlightened beings such as Buddha, after the dissolution of his body, without any remainder of physical existence. It is called Anupadisya Nibbinadatu. It should be noted that Buddhism accepts the transmigration and impermanence, but rejects the idea of God and soul, Atman. According to Buddha, the soul is a myth. In the Buddhist universe, there are many realms, worlds, and many different kinds of beings. One can be born as any one of them. Traditionally, Buddhism teaches the existence of the 10 realms of being. At the top is Buddha, and the scale descends as follows: Bodhisattva, an enlightened being destined to be a Buddha, but purposely remaining on earth to teach others; Pratyeka Buddha, a Buddha on their own; Sravaka, direct disciple of Buddha; heavenly beings; superhuman angels; human beings; Asura, fighting spirits; beasts; Preta, hungry ghosts; and depraved men, hellish beings. These 10 realms are mutually immanent and mutually inclusive, each one having in it the remaining 9 realms. For example, the realm of human beings has all the other 9 states, from hell to Buddhahood. Man is at the same time capable of real selfishness, creating his own hell, or is truly compassionate, reflecting the compassion of Buddha. Buddhism states that man is characteristically placed at the midpoint of the 10 stages. He can either lower himself abruptly or gradually into hell, or rise to the enlightened state of the Buddha through discipline, cultivation, and the awakening of faith. The connection between different lives is established by karma. As opposed to ritual action of Brahmanical tradition, karma in Buddhist tradition is result of an action depending on the intention more than the action itself. Buddhism entails less feelings of guilt and puts great emphasis on mind. Buddha stresses that it is mental anguish, such as remorse, anxiety, guilt, etc., which is to be avoided in order to cultivate a calm and peaceful mind. Rebirth is governed by the cumulative results of the karma of a particular life. It is rather interesting to note that even though Buddhism emphasizes on non-violence, ahimsa, yet it does not necessarily entail vegetarianism, and monks were not forbidden from eating meat. Buddhism and Brahmanism, the Buddhist monks considered worm based on action, unlike the Brahmanas, who conferred on it a divine sanction, dividing people based on birth. In Anguttara Nikaya, it is mentioned that when a person joins the Sangha, he becomes Vivanyanti, without worm. The Sangha had members from all castes, such as Mahakasapa, Saripata, Moggallana, prominent Brahmana monks; the Buddha, Ananda, Aniruddha, prominent Kshatriya monks; Upali, a barber; Chunda, blacksmith who fed the Buddha his last meal. The Pali Canon also reverses the order of rank and places the Kshatriya worm higher than the Brahmana. Even though Buddhism was certainly more inclusive than the Brahmanical tradition, yet it supported social order based on classes and did not aim at abolishing social differences. Certain Buddhist tradition rules tried to maintain the status quo. For instance, there were a number of conditions for entry, such as the ban on the entry of debtors, slaves, and soldiers without permission from their respective masters. This was naturally biased against these social dropouts. Similarly, both Brahmanism and Buddhism emphasize on the virtues of carrying out familial obligations, protecting private property, and respecting political authority. Both also did not participate directly in production and lived on alms given by society. Reasons for spread and popularity of Buddhism. ABCDE Buddhism left an abiding mark on the history of India, and it gradually became popular in Magadha and other parts of the country. With the support of Emperor Ashoka, it further spread its wings to Central Asia, West Asia, and Sri Lanka, gradually transforming into a world religion. Various reasons are attributed to its spread. Buddhism appealed to the common man as, unlike Brahmanism, it was far more liberal and democratic. Since it attacked the worm system, it particularly won the support of the lower classes. It was open to people of all castes, and even women were admitted to the Sangha. This section of the society was neither given sacred threads nor was allowed to read Vedas, so conversion to Buddhism freed them from marks of inferiority. Buddhism also found a virgin soil for conversion in terms of the non-Vedic people. The people of Magadha readily accepted Buddhism, as they were earlier looked down upon by the orthodox Brahmanas, who considered Magadha to be out of the holy Aryavarta. The Buddha's personality and his rational doctrine helped immensely in the popularity of Buddhism. He tried to win over opponents by his wit and presence of mind, and by maintaining poise and calm under difficult situations. Unlike Brahmanism, whose texts were in Sanskrit and hence accessible only to a few Brahmanas, the Buddha's teachings were in Pali, the language of the common man, which further aided in the spread of Buddhism. The patronization by monarchies of Magad, Kosla, Kaushambi, and several other Gansangs and their people contributed to its further popularity. Buddhism tried to mitigate the evils resulting from the new material life of the 6th century BCE. Since the Buddhists had a keen awareness of the problems, social and economic disparities, they presented innovative solutions to these concerns. Buddhism asked people not to accumulate wealth, indulge in cruelty or violence, ideas that were welcomed by the people. ABC reasons for the decline of Buddhism. It is rather ironical that from early 12th century, Buddhism began to disappear from the land of its birth. Various reasons are responsible for this. Buddhism succumbed to the same rituals and dogmas which it had originally denounced. In the beginning, it was inspired by the spirit of reform. But, gradually it became victim to the same evils of Brahmanism which it had earlier fought. It changed for worse over a period of time. The Buddhist monks gave up Pali, the language of the people, and took to Sanskrit, the language of a few intellectuals. Later, from 1st century CE, they also practiced large-scale idol worship and received numerous offerings from the devotees. This resulted in corruption of the ascetic life of Buddhist monks. The principles prescribed by Buddha were conveniently forgotten, and thus started the degradation of the Buddhist monks and their preaching. Some Brahmana rulers, such as Pushyamitra Shunga, the Huna king Mihirakula, worshipper of Shiva, and Shaivite Shashank of Goila, persecuted the Buddhists on a large scale. The liberal donations to the monasteries gradually declined. Also, some rich monasteries were specially targeted by the Turkish and other invaders. Key term concept meaning purpose A. Chatyas prayer halls of monks B. Viharas monasteries C. Pravraja ceremony to mark a person's going forth from home into homelessness and his/her becoming a novice under a preceptor. Involved shaving the head and donning ochre robes. D. Upasampada ordination ceremony when the novice becomes a full-fledged member of the monastic community. E. Uposatha ceremony held on full moon and new moon. F. Parajika literally meaning defeat. It included for most serious offences involving expulsion from the sangh, sexual intercourse, taking what is not given, killing someone, and making false claim of spiritual attainment. G. Pavrana is a Buddhist holy day celebrated on Ashwin full moon of the lunar month. It marks the end of the rainy season, sometimes called Buddhist Lent. On this day, each monk must come before the community of monks, sangh, and atone for an offense he may have committed during the Vasa, rainy season. H. Upasaka's male followers who have taken refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangh, but who have not taken monastic vows. I. Upasika's female followers who have taken refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangh, but who have not taken monastic vows. J. Bodhisattva enlightened beings who have renounced their own salvation and put off entering paradise in order to help others attain enlightenment. They devote all their power and energy to save suffering beings in this world. As deities of compassion, Bodhisattvas are typically represented with precious jewelry, elegant garments, and graceful postures. K. Bhikkhu Sangh of monks. L. Bhikkhuni Sangh of nuns. M. Thirtha verses of elder monks. N. Tharikta verses of elder nuns. O. Shramana Samana one who strives to realize the truth. P. Parivrajka Wanderer. Q. Shakra God Indra Buddhist Council Time Place Ruler President Specificity 1st 483 BCE Rajgriha Ajat Shatru Mahakasapa held soon after the death of the Buddha. It was at this council that the Buddha's teachings were divided into three categories or baskets: Pitaka discourses, discipline and higher knowledge. Asterisk Vinay Pitaka rules of the order, recited by Upali. Asterisk Sata Pitaka great collection of Buddha's sermons, by Ananda. Second 383 BCE Vaishali Kalsoka Sabakame. The objective was to settle a debate on certain practices of Buddhist monks, especially in Western India division, Sthaviravadins and Mahasamgikas. The group who stayed called themselves the elders, Therapali. They felt they were in keeping with the original spirit of the Buddha's teachings. The other group, the Great Community, Mahasamgika in Sanskrit, interpreted Buddha's teachings more liberally, but in a way that they felt was more true to his intentions. These two groups would eventually evolve into Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. 3rd 250 BCE Patliputra Ashoka Moglipuktatissa. The objective of the council was to purify the Buddhist movement from opportunistic factions. Origin of Theravada school. Tripitaka coded in Pali language. Sent Buddhist missionaries to other countries. 4th 1st century CE Kashmir Kanishka Vasumitra Buddhism divided into the Mahayana sect and the Hinayan sect. Some believe that the 4th Buddhist Council is the name of two separate Buddhist council meetings. The Theravada had a 4th Buddhist council in the 1st century BCE in Tambapani, i.e., Sri Lanka, at Alokalena, now Aluvihara, during the time of King Vatthagmaniyabhaya. The second one was held by the Sarvastivla school, in Kashmir around the 1st century CE. Different schools of Buddhism. Important Buddhist writers. A. Aswagosha, author of the Buddhacharita, in Sanskrit. Contemporary of Kanishka. He was a poet, dramatist, musician, scholar, and debater. B. Nagarjuna. He is considered to be the founder of the Madhyamaka school of Mahayana Buddhism. He was a friend and contemporary of Satwahana King Gautamiputra of Andhra. C. Asanga and Vasubandhu, two brothers who flourished in the Punjab region in the 4th century CE. Asanga was the most important teacher of Yogachara or Vijnanvaya school founded by his guru, Maitreyanatha. Vasubandhu's greatest work, Abhidhammakosa, is still considered an important encyclopedia of Buddhism. D. Buddhaghosa. He lived in the 5th century and was a great Pali scholar. His best known work is the Visuddhimagga, Path of Purification, a comprehensive summary and analysis of the Theravada understanding of the Buddha's path to liberation. E. Dinnaga, the last mighty intellectual of the 5th century, also well known as the founder of the Buddhist logic. F. Dharmakirti. He lived in the 7th century AD and was another great Buddhist logician, a subtle philosophical thinker and dialectician. Hinayan, Theravada, Mahayana Vajrayana. A literally means the lesser path, and Theravada signifies doctrine of the elders. Literally means the greater path. The terms Mahayana and Hinayan were given by the Mahayana school. Literally means vehicle of thunderbolt. The Vajrayana or diamond vehicle is also referred to as Mantrayana, Tantrayana, Tantric, or esoteric Buddhism. The period of Indian Vajrayana Buddhism has been classified as the final period of Buddhism in India. It marks the transition from Mahayana speculative thought to the enactment of Buddhist ideas in individual life. The term Vajra is used to signify the absolutely real and indestructible in a human being, as opposed to the fictions an individual entertains about himself and his nature. Yana is the spiritual pursuit of the ultimately valuable and indestructible. B. It is considered the orthodox school and to be truer to Gautama Buddha's teachings than Mahayana. Theravada was the original school of Buddhist philosophy. It is the heterodox school of Buddhist philosophy. It originated later than Hinayan. It has two chief philosophical schools, the Madhyamika and Yogachara. It was a form of Buddhism, which appeared in eastern India in the 8th century and was finally established in Tibet in the 11th century, as a result of a mission sent from the great Vajrayana monastery of Vikramshila. The Two Truths doctrine is the central concept of the Vajrayana practice path and lays down the philosophical basis for its methods. The Two Truths identifies conventional and ultimate truths. Conventional truth is the truth of consensus reality and common sense notions of what does and does not exist. Ultimate truth is reality as viewed by an awakened or enlightened mind. See, its scriptures are in Pali, the language that Buddha taught in. Its scriptures are in Sanskrit, the language of Indian scholasticism. Most of the terms originated in the Sanskrit language of Tantric Indian Buddhism, but since it deals with inner experiences, the Vajrayana texts use a highly symbolic language, Samdhyabhasa, or twilight language, that aims at helping the followers of its disciplines to evoke within themselves experiences considered to be the most valuable available to human beings. Vajrayana thus attempts to recapture the enlightenment experience of the historical Buddha. D. A school of Buddhism which treats Buddha as nothing more than a human being, does not believe in idol worship and tries to attain individual salvation through self-discipline and meditation. Ultimate aim of Hinayan is thus Nirvana. A school of Buddhism which treats Buddha as God and worships idols of Buddha and Bodhisattva embodying Buddha nature. Mahayana believes in universal liberation from suffering for all beings, hence the great vehicle. Ultimate aim of Mahayana is spiritual upliftment. It allows salvation to be alternatively obtained through the grace of the Amitabha Buddha by means of faith and devotion to mindfulness of the Buddha. It believes in it is an esoteric extension of Buddhist thought and practice which sees itself as a quicker, more effective path to enlightenment. Its followers believed that salvation can be best attained by acquiring the magical power, which they called Vajra. As with Mahayana Buddhism, the Vajrayana emphasizes the role of the Bodhisattva, but the tradition tends to favor fierce deities known as the Tharas. Vajrayana ritual and devotion employs mantras, esoteric verbal formulas, mandalas, diagrams and paintings used in visualization practices, and a complex array of other rituals. Great emphasis is placed on the role of the Guru in the Vajrayana. These are religious teachers who have mastered the philosophical and ritual tradition. The Tibet translation of Guru is Lama, and the various Tibetan schools of the Vajrayana trace long lineages of gurus who serve both as religious and political leaders. The Dalai Lama is the most well-known of Tibet's lamas. Mantras. At present, Theravada Buddhism is to be found in Sri Lanka, its main bastion, and also in Myanmar, Thailand, and other parts of Southeast Asia. Ashoka patronized Hinayan. At present, Mahayana Buddhism is to be found in Japan, China, and other Asian countries. Kanishka patronized Mahayana and later, Harshavardhana supported it as well. It became popular in eastern India, particularly Bengal and Bihar, and is predominant in the Himalayan nations of Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, and also Mongolia. Vardhaman Mahavira and Jainism. Early Jain literature Jaina teachings were first preserved as an oral tradition, but later they were collated and recorded. In olden times, monks strictly followed the 5 great vows of Jainism. Even religious scriptures were considered possessions and therefore knowledge of the religion was never documented. Later Jaina teachers realized that it was extremely difficult to keep memorizing the entire Jain literature compiled by the many scholars of the past and present. In fact, significant knowledge was already lost and the rest was polluted with modifications and errors. Hence, they decided to document the Jaina literature as known to them. The word canon for the Jaina holy writings is increasingly felt to be inadequate, for it implies an unchanging body of texts sanctioned by a central authority. The sacred books of the Jainas are known as Siddhanta or Agama, what has come down to us or tradition, and these earliest texts are in an Eastern dialect of Prakrit known as Urdhmati. To a large extent, the concepts of Siddhanta and Agama denote fluid groupings that are open to change. The complication of the entire canon is traditionally believed to have taken place in the 5th or 6th century CE at a council presided over by Devradhik Chamashramna held in Vallabhi in Gujarat. Compilations such as Acharanga Sutra, Sutra Kritanga, and the Kalpa Sutra are regarded as the early texts. Jainism around 3rd century CE split into 2 major sects, the Digambara sky-clad or naked, and the Shvedambara clad in white. Lord Mahaviras, who had knowledge of a minimum original teachings of the Jainas, were known as Srakevlis. The Srakevlis wrote many texts, sutras, expanding the subject matter defined in the Angas. Collectively, these texts are called Angabhyas, meaning outside of Angas. The Shvetambara canon includes the 12 Angas, 12 Upangas, scriptures which provide further explanation of Angas, 10 Prakyanas, scriptures which describe independent or knowledge, Keval Gyan. They orally compiled the direct preaching of Lord Maha. Early Jain literature Jaina teachings were first preserved as an oral tradition, but later they were collated and recorded. In olden times, monks strict
followed the 5 great vows of Jainism. Even religious scriptures were considered possessions and therefore knowledge of the religion was never documented. Later Jaina teachers realized that it was extremely difficult to keep memorizing the entire Jain literature compiled by the many scholars of the past and present. In fact, significant knowledge was already lost and the rest was polluted with modifications and errors. Hence, they decided to document the Jaina literature as known to them. The word canon for the Jaina holy writings is increasingly felt to be inadequate, for it implies an unchanging body of texts sanctioned by a central authority. The sacred books of the Jainas are known as Siddhanta or Agama, what has come down to us or tradition, and these earliest texts are in an Eastern dialect of Prakrit known as Art-Magadhi. To a large extent, the concepts of Siddhanta and Agama denote fluid groupings that are open to change. The complication of the entire canon is traditionally believed to have taken place in the 5th or 6th century CE at a council presided over by Devardhike Shamashramana held in Vallabhi in Gujarat. Compilations such as Ach Aranga Sutra, Sutra Krayanga, and the Kalpa Sutra are regarded as the early texts. Jainism around 3rd century CE split into two major sects, the Digambara/sky-clad or naked, and the Shvetambara/clad in white. Lord Mahavira's immediate disciples were known as Ganadharas. These disciples were mendicants, as the Jaina
is, and have followed him since before his enlightenment. All Gandharas possessed perfect knowledge, Keval Gyan. They orally compiled the direct preaching of Lord Mahavira into 12 main texts, sutras. These texts are known as Angas, limbs or main texts, and are the oldest religious scriptures and the backbone of Jaina literature. Monks who had knowledge of a minimum of 10 purvas, means, early, or previous texts which are considered original teachings of the Jainas, were known as Sratkelis. The Sratkelis wrote many texts, sutras, expanding the subject matter defined in the Angas. Collectively, these texts are called Angabhahyas, meaning outside of Angas. The Shvetambara canon includes the 12 Angas, 12 Upangas, scriptures which provide further explanation of Angas, 10 Prakirnas, scriptures which describe independent or miscellaneous subjects of the Jaina religion, 6 Chedha Sutras. Subject matter described in these is only for monks and nuns and not for lay people. It relates to the conduct and behavior of monks and nuns and also explains how they can repent for their sins and mistakes. Formula Sutras, scriptures which are essential for monks and nuns to study in the earlier stages of their monkhood, and a number of texts such as the Nandi Sukra and Anuyugavara. Believing that all the original Angas have been, hence, they decided to document the Jaina literature as known to them. The word, canon, for the Jaina holy writings is increasingly felt to be inadequate, for it implies an unchanging body of texts sanctioned by a central authority. The sacred books of the Jainas are known as Siddhanta or Agama, what has come down to us or tradition, and these earliest texts are in an Eastern dialect of Prakrit known as Art-Magadhi. To a large extent, the concepts of Siddhanta and Agama denote fluid groupings that are open to change. The complication of the entire canon is traditionally believed to have taken place in the 5th or 6th century CE at a council presided over by Devardhik Shamashramana held in Vallabhi in Gujarat. Compilations such as Acharanga Sutra, Sukra Kritanga, and the Kalpa Sutra are regarded as the early texts.